So my name is Samuel Kadima, and I'm the founder of Nairobi DevOps community. And I'd like to invite you to this session. Those who are joining us for the first time, feel welcome. And we are going to have a great session. It's going to be a fireside chat. So you are welcome to ask any questions that you may have about tech, about DevOps, about career. So any questions that you may have, and we have a decorated speaker, Viktor Farcic, who is going to be responding to the questions. So we look forward to that, and we are going to have a good session and insightful session as well. So let me take you, before we go even to our agenda, I have a quote of the day here that I would like to share with you guys. So the quote is that attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference. So if you have a positive attitude, it's possible for you to achieve some, possible for you to push yourself, and you can be able to do something that maybe looked too hard to do, but since you had a positive attitude, you can be able to push yourself and be able to achieve something. But if you have a negative attitude, even something that is easy may not, you may not be able to do it, and also you may not be able to, people around you may not be able to see you as a person they can collaborate with, the person who they can work with. So if you have a positive attitude, even if you don't have too many skills, or if you're not so good in what you do, but you have a positive attitude, people will be willing to work with you. So I will now go into the agenda. So the agenda of the day, we are going to start with an icebreaker. And then after the icebreaker, I'm going to tell you more about our community, the Nairobi DevOps community. And then after that, we are going to have the fireside chat with Viktor. And all through it's just going to be Q&A. So for today, we don't have like the normal presentations we've been having where we have a speaker presenting the entire topic they're covering, and then we do a Q&A at the end. So you're just going to do a Q&A throughout. You guys will be typing your questions on the chat as we go on, and I'll be reading those questions and asking them on your behalf. Then Viktor will be able to respond to all of them. So to our first item on the agenda, the icebreaker. So would you rather have slow internet or always forget your password? So you can respond on the chat. I'm looking at the chat to see how you guys are responding. So would you rather have slow internet or always forget your passwords? Which one would you rather have? Forgetting your passwords or slow internet? So I can see here, Mamane says forget my password. Okay, that's very interesting. What about if you forget the password to your internet? And then I can see Sips also forgetting my password. Okay, anyone else? Keep them the responses coming on the chat box. Looking at it, and as I can see Ian as well says, forget my password. Slow internet is just frustrating. Maybe you can hear as I wait for more responses. I can hear from Viktor. So Viktor, you can share with us which one would you rather have, slow internet or forget the password? Viktor Farcic. Oh, so I can see he has typed on the chat, I could not live without fast internet. So for him as well, it's forgetting passwords. And then I can see now, well, here says, forget my passwords. As long as I have a password manager, they can survive slow internet. Okay. And then also I think those are the ones that the responses that we've gotten so far. So I can see Mohammed also says, for Mohammed now is the only person who prefers slow internet. And then Viktor doesn't remember passwords, so he's already forgotten them. So, but we thank the people who created the password managers did us some justice in ensuring that we can have a good experience. Because without them, we couldn't remember our passwords, or we could just have one password that we are using across all platforms. So we'll proceed to the next item on the agenda. So I'm going to introduce you to the community. So the community that has organized this event is called Nairobi DevOps Community. And if you're joining us for the first time, we are just a community of DevOps enthusiasts. So what we basically do is we share knowledge, we network, we ensure that people who do not have knowledge in DevOps, or people who are seeking to learn more about DevOps, are able to learn about DevOps from experts within the community. So we are just a community that is driven towards ensuring that people can grow, people can learn, people can be impacted, and they can be able to collaborate as well. So through the events we have, the experts share their knowledge, and the people who are either not experts or people who are already experts, but maybe they just want to learn about the tools they are not using, to explore more tools so that they can see if they can use them. They benefit from what the experts share during those sessions. So we have online sessions like this one, the one we're having here right now. We also have physical sessions, which are normally workshops, and we also have campus. We do the campus tours in universities to expose university students to cloud computing and DevOps so that they can start early to prepare themselves for a career in cloud and DevOps. And we also do mentorship sessions for them. So we also share about the career path that people have gone through from university to where they're at right now. So that is part of what we do during the campus tours. And we also have events that we just do for people to network. So we may have something like we did the data center visit, so people get exposed to data centers, but in the process, they also manage to connect and learn. So we are also planning more events that are geared to ensure that people can network within the community and be able to add more value to each other. So we are also organizing an event called DevOps Days event that is going to happen in Nairobi on 1st June, and it's going to be free attendance for everyone. It's going to happen at Strathmore University, and everyone is invited to attend that event. There will be a number of speakers and companies that will be present on that day to share with you a lot of insights on different DevOps technologies and trends. So our mission for the community is to create a supportive and inclusive community that values diversity and supports learning and growth. And our vision is to be a leading DevOps community in Nairobi and beyond, driving innovation and empowering professionals to excel in their careers. In case you want to help us as the community to be able to deliver better in order for us to be able to organize better events, or to give us even feedback, you can join us, and we welcome anyone. If anyone who who feels like they have anything they can contribute to the community, we welcome you, even if it's not listed here. So you can help us by connecting us to speakers who can add value. You can speak as well if you are an expert. And you can also give us feedback on anything. You can criticize us, and we welcome any feedback and criticism. You can share on our channels. So you can post anything that you've come across. If you encountered a bug and you managed to solve it, if you encountered an article that you thought it was interesting, or a video, or anything that you think can help people in the community, invited to share. And also you are invited to reshare what we post so that more people can be able to learn about what we are doing, and also they can be able to attend these events when we organize them. So, and you can also help us in organizing events. So if you think maybe you're a good event organizer, or you have some skills, or you like to learn, even if you're not good in event organizing, but you'd like to learn about event organizing, you are invited to join us, and we'll be able to help you, and then now you'll help us in turn. And then we also do branding, like for our posters, printing of shirts, designing charts, and all the branding that we do for the community. So in case you are gifted in this or any other area, so even if you are a social media manager, or you have social media management skills, or any other skill that you think can be beneficial to the community, we invite you to join us and help us in becoming a leader DevOps community in Nairobi and beyond. So in case you are not in the community, you can just scan these codes and you'll be able to join. So scan the code. I'll leave it here maybe for 20 seconds so that you can be able to scan, and then you'll be able to join. Okay. Having said that, now we can move on to the next thing, which is what brought us here, which is the chat that we are going to have with Victor. And I invite you guys to be posting on the channel. So if you have any questions, you can be posting those questions on the channel, because disabled automatic. You cannot be able to speak automatically. So just post the questions on the chat, and I'll be responding to. I'll be reading the questions so that Victor can hear them, and then he can be able to respond to them. So yeah. So if you have any question that is tech related, career related, or any relevant, or any question, just ask any question, and I believe we'll be able to get a response. So we'll just stop sharing, and then we start our session by introducing our speaker. So Victor is a very decorated person, very experienced. He's a person who has a lot of say about containers, about Kubernetes, about DevOps, and is a person with a lot of years of experience, and a person who is very willing to share knowledge that he has learned over the years, so that other people can learn from the things that went well for him and the mistakes he did, so that we do not go through the same path that would so that we can have an easier path as we navigate the tech landscape. So it's here just to ensure that we can be more comfortable, that we can have we can easily navigate through tech. So Victor, if you don't mind, so I would like just to invite you to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us more about what you do and who you are. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is such a great event. I'm really enjoying this. And as you heard already, oh, did my camera die? Wait, okay. I don't know what happened. The moment I started speaking, my camera switched off.
Okay.
I don't know why. What is off? Okay, I'll give me a minute. Let me see what's going on.
Okay. So as he fixes the camera, I'm looking at the chat for your questions. So you can be typing your questions. If you have any questions, start typing on the chats. So anything you'd like to be addressed, you can just type it on the chat and it will be addressed. So any questions that you have, keep them, keep posting them. So now you are on mute, Victor, if you're speaking. You are on mute. Your microphone is on mute.
Okay. How about now? Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay.
So,
brilliant.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry for that. Things happen. What can you do?
Yeah, it's fine. Now we can.
There was a introduction. Yes. So my name is Viktor. I work in Upbound. That's a company behind Crossplane. Crossplane is CNCF Cloud Native Computing Foundation project. It's open source. And the goal behind the project I'm working on is to extend Kubernetes way beyond what it's doing right now, and enable people to use Kubernetes to manage resources like in AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or on-prem. Also, it is a way to enable people to create their own platforms and quite a few other things, right? But I'm not here to talk about crossplane. We can talk about it as well. I'm here to answer any questions, to try to answer any questions you might have, right? So on top of that, I don't know, I've been in this industry probably for more than 30 years, something like that. I've done everything from being a developer to being a tester to being a manager to being a lead director. I've done everything one can do, mostly because I get bored very quickly, so I change what I do all the time. Anyways, that's me. I'm Viktor. Long time in this industry, do random things. That's my definition of what I am, right? And really pleased to be here. And hopefully we will have some questions, not only from Samuel, but you guys. Ask anything.
Yeah. So I hope now that you've heard about what the background of Victor, you can be able to, you have some context that can help you now ask your questions. So I'm looking forward to seeing the questions on the chat box. So, but as we wait for those questions, I would maybe just start asking you some questions. And the first question that I would like to ask you is, how did you get started into tech? How did you how did you find your passion, or what made you have the desire to be in tech?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I started with tech in what would that be? Early 90s, something like that, when tech was not a thing yet. There was no school, there was no university, none of those things. And the first things I was doing is cracking games and software, right? I was one of the pirates. I was cracking and trying to get my hands on anything, right? No matter the cost. And then eventually I moved on and started working in real tech, let's say. But so yeah, since late 90s, I've been in tech, one form or another. Long before I actually, I started in tech when I was like, I probably sold my first application when I was 15 or something like that.
Oh, so you started, you even created, you started like an entrepreneur, you created a project and you managed to sell it?
Not for much money. It was, I sold the application for accounting in the school where I was attending. So it wasn't almost any money, just something I did.
Okay, very interesting. So if you can compare between then when you are starting and now, when we have internet, we have the cloud, we have a lot of applications have already been created for us to make life easier and even making information accessible. So if you compare then and now, what would you say
Yes.
are some?
So
okay, go ahead.
What is expected from us now is very different than what was before back then, right? 90s.
Okay.
We have a lot of tools that help us, but the requirements are very, very different, much more complicated, right? I could, in the past, I could do things on my own and, small teams, not big systems and so on and so forth. Now we have tools that make those things much easier, but we are not anymore doing what I was doing in 90s. Right now, we're talking about much bigger scale, much smaller latency, much tougher requirements, right? So we are getting tools to do things in an easier way, but also what is expected from us is all the time greater and greater. So it's equally hard, more or less, just very, very different. And yes, there was no internet. I would take a taxi or drive to a customer with a floppy disk, kind of, hey, here's the new release. Let me put it inside of your server or something like that, right? So releases in that time were me taking a car, driving, and hoping that it works, because if it doesn't work, and very often it doesn't, I would take the car back to the office or home or wherever, work for a couple of days, figure it out, and then take another car drive to let's see whether it works now. Who knows, right? That was the time when we would release maybe once a year or something like that, right? Maybe sometimes even once in 2 years, right? Very, very different. And then we got modems. That strange sound. That's when we were dialing over normal phones and what's not, and it's very different now, right? Now we have internet, we are interconnected. I work, for example, remotely. There is no other colleague even in the same country where I am. We are remote,
Okay.
all interconnected. It's very, very different.
Okay. Yeah, that's quite a journey. So I see you had a lot of challenges. So how did you? Right now, we've automated even deployments. People can have, in case even there is a bug, you can easily be able to identify the bug easily. So when you are carrying your software through the floppy disk and delivering them, so how are you able now to ensure that your people who are utilizing your applications are always happy, and in case there is an issue, so how are you maybe monitoring or ensuring
Yeah,
that people
so
just have a good experience?
it depends on the complexity we're doing, right? But now, these days, we are releasing many times a day, right? And
Yeah.
monitoring is probably one of the most important parts of that. Metrics, logs, traces, what's or not. We should be able, if the system is done right, we should be able to find out that something is wrong with that before the users even find out, right? Or at the same time as users find out that there's something wrong, right? You normally collect the metrics. I tend to use open source a lot, Prometheus, logs in Loki or something like that, traces in Jaeger or Grafana Tempo, and then set up a bunch of alerts. And I don't like watching dashboards and stuff like that. I think that's waste of time. What I really like to do is set up alerts so that I get notified when something is wrong, and then jump and figure it out, right? And on top of that, we have tools like Argo rollouts or Flagger that allow you to gradually release new version, monitor, so that application itself, so not me, right, but application itself is monitoring the metrics and what's not, and deciding whether to continue progressing towards the new release or go back, right? So you can automate a lot. You can never automate everything, but you can automate a lot of things these days, right?
Yeah, very true. So I've actually I'm a big fan of what you do, and I've been watching some of your tutorials on your YouTube channel, and most of your tutorials are about containers, Kubernetes, and those are important things even for DevOps. So what makes you so passionate about containers and Kubernetes in the entire DevOps landscape?
If I would have to pick up one thing that makes me very excited about both containers and Kubernetes, they're very different things, but serve very different purposes, but nevertheless, is standardization, right? What makes containers amazing is not that, actually, I don't care much about containers, to be honest. What makes container images amazing is that we finally, as industry, agreed that, okay, this is the standard, right? This is how we package our software. And then that's a package, and we all know what it is. And then you can run it as containers. You can run container images as WASM, right? It doesn't even have to be containers. But what I'm really excited is that standardization, so that we can all talk the same language, right? Right now, we're also having some real life standardization. We're all talking English, right? No matter that my native language might be Spanish, or might be something else, right? But with standardization, in this case, language, we can all speak the same language. We can all understand each other. And that's what Kubernetes and container images gave us as well, right? We know exactly how we package something that would be container image, and we know how we create APIs, which would be Kubernetes, that allow us to interconnect different things, right? Everything is standardized in Kubernetes, and that standard can be extended and so on and so forth, so that all the different tools that you might be using, they can all work with each other, right? You can use Argo CD with Caverno, with Crossplay, with this or that, and they can all work with each other, right? In the past, before Kubernetes, we couldn't get that, right? It's not that we couldn't make things work with each other, but that was a very painful process. Things were not designed to work with each other. Like, hey, I don't know, you have some Jenkins over there, you have some Ansible over there, right? Like, how do they talk to each other? We don't know, right? And that was all custom and all non-standard. Standardization is what enabled Kubernetes to become so huge, because now all the projects and software vendors can say, okay, from now on, I'm going to develop my solution on top of Kubernetes because I know that others are using that standard, because I know that other tools will work with it, and so on and so forth. So standardization, if I would pick one word, is what makes those awesome.
Okay, yeah. So now I think I can read some questions here from the chat that people have posted. So the first question is from Lusengeri. It's asking, consider a scenario where your team was equally skilled in a closed source service such as AWS ECS as well as Kubernetes. Is there any scenario where you could choose ECS over Kubernetes?
Short answer is no. There is no scenario in which I would consider ECS over Kubernetes. I cannot imagine that scenario. There are scenarios where I would choose something over Kubernetes. Like I would choose Google Cloud Run, for example, if you would be talking about Google Cloud, because it's absolutely awesome and very different. I would choose Azure Container Apps over Kubernetes in some cases, but ECS, never. ECS was AWS attempt to compete with Kubernetes, right? And it failed, right? And even within AWS now, most of the people use EKS rather than ECS, right? And also one more note that I would add there is no such thing as 100% closed source, right? What you see on the top might be closed source. You see ECS and say closed source. Yes, that's true. But everything below ECS, what you don't see is open source, right? It runs on top of Linux, open source, right? It uses certain libraries, open source. There is open source everywhere. It's just that sometimes it's not 100% and sometimes it is. That's the only difference. But there is always open source, right? Behind everything. I don't think that anybody developed a solution that's 100% closed source. My own hardware, my own operating system, my own libraries, my own everything. And even the closed source language, right? Kind of never happened. But anyway, short answer, never ECS. I don't like it. I think that it failed.
Okay, thank you for responding to that. So there is another question here from Kevin to A. Is asking, considering you have been in the industry for a long time, what are some of mistakes and assumptions you see developers and tech professionals keep doing? Do you have some you have learned from your own experience?
Yes, some experience.
So
yes.
any mistakes?
There are many things, right? One common problem is that people do not really work together for different reasons. Sometimes job protection, right? They don't organize themselves as a team. They protect their knowledge and stuff like that, which is just silly. That's why I like open source, right? A big one is also that I've seen many companies now thinking that, okay, DevOps is all about me finding person or people who know how to do everything. That is just silly. That does not work. Does not work at all. I can stop you there right away. There is no such thing. I don't think that we should even have something called DevOps engineer, right? We have people who are specialized in different areas. The bigger the system, the more specialized you need to be, right? You have a person specialized in databases, another person specialized in operating systems, networking, maybe storage, whatever that something is, right? And DevOps is more like an idea than a role where you say, okay, how can I combine all those experiences, all those specialties into something meaningful that works together, right? It's about removing those walls, those barriers between people and so on and so forth. So hiring DevOps engineers is very often a mistake, right? I mean, if you're a DevOps engineer and you get bigger salary because you're called DevOps engineer, I think that's great. Keep doing that. But the idea that somebody is going to do everything is just silly. It doesn't work, right? Unless it's very, very small organization. Like if it's 20 people, maybe 50, that's fine, but not beyond that.
Okay. So thank you for responding to that. So I believe, Kevin, you've been answered. So I think he asked about any mistakes that you yourself, are there any mistakes that you've done that you think people can learn from?
Oh, I've done a lot. So, sorry, I misunderstood the question. I tend to play or use latest technology sometimes before people even find out about it, right? And I tend to play certain bets, and very often those bets fail, right? For example, back in the day when orchestration started, I was sure that Mesos is going to be the thing, and me and the company I worked with invested years in Mesos. Mesos was a big mistake, right? Then I said, okay, it's not going to be Mesos, it's going to be Swarm. Swarm is going to win, right? Docker Swarm, and that was a huge mistake as well. And all those mistakes end up costing a lot of money, right? Because me and people working with me, maybe it can be two people, or it could be 1,000 people, invest their time right into those guesses. And they're sometimes right, they're sometimes wrong. So I make mistakes all the time. Like most of the things, whatever, if you watch one of my videos from 2 years ago, that's a mistake as well. Whatever I said 2 years ago is not good anymore. Kind of, it changes all the time, right? And I think that when you're close to the edge, and I don't mean edge computing, but edge like in the latest, you're inevitably going to make mistakes. You're going to waste your time. You're going to waste money. But if one of the 5 bets turns up to be correct, that has a huge payoff, right? So yeah, majority of things I do are mistakes, but then some of them are not, and that turns out to be very successful.
Okay. So what do you think someone can do in order now to, because now people try to embrace technology as it comes out. So how do they ensure that they're not making the mistake of maybe going too fast or making decisions very fast?
No, don't. No. It's good. You should be making mistakes. Mistakes are a good thing, right? Going fast is a good thing, right? The worst thing you can do is to say, I'm going to stop the world, and then I'm going to spend months thinking about what's the right decision. Don't do that. That's even bigger mistake, right? Try it out. It works or it doesn't work, it fails, and you will know better, right? You learn from your mistakes a lot. Like those that I mentioned are mistakes from certain perspective, like, hey, Mesos, right? Hey, Swarm, and then Kubernetes, right? It took years between those until we landed on Kubernetes, but all of those are certain experiences that are applied later, right? I learned a lot from Mesos. A lot of what I learned from Mesos was afterwards applied to Swarm, and then that failed. But a lot of things that we learned from, like, we learned a lot about the experience from Swarm, right? That was applied to Kubernetes later on. So those mistakes are not necessarily bad. They are mistakes, right? It would be better maybe if I jumped straight into Kubernetes. And I'm talking about the days when nobody even heard about Kubernetes, very, very early days, right? It would be better, yes. But if I was afraid to make a mistake, then I would jump into Kubernetes not at the right moment. I would jump into Kubernetes 10 years later, right? Because I'm afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid. Mistakes are fine. The question is not whether you make a mistake or not. The question is how fast you can recuperate from your mistakes, right? Okay, something fails in production, that's not a problem. If you can fix it in 3 minutes, it's fine. The problem is not whether you will make a mistake. The problem is how good you are at correcting them.
Okay, very insightful. So I think there is another question here on the chat from Nahuel. Is asking, I think, is it tilt or till? And then
The first one is Tilt. The second one, I don't know.
I think it's CTL. So the question, so I can just read for everyone. So, and CTL, PTL are great tools to get developers involved with how Kubernetes locally.
Yeah.
Okay. Are
Are
there
there more
better or
recent
more
tools?
recent tools to encourage team of developers to get involved with in this space?
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily fond anymore of Tilt and similar tools for two reasons. I think that they so what I'm trying to do, majority of people try to go from left to right, kind of like, let's figure out how we can do this locally first and then figure out how to do it in production. I tend to think in the other way around, right? Let's figure out production first, right? And then what can we use from production to enable people to work locally or maybe remotely as well, right? Because what I don't want is to maintain two sets of tools, right, for the same thing. Because my application running locally, my application running in production should be as similar as possible, right?
Yeah.
So if you use, I don't know, Helm in production, use Helm locally as well. Just execute Helm install, and there you go, right?
Yeah.
So whatever is the same in both production and local or similar, try to use the same thing with as few variations as possible. Now there are certain things that are not happening in production, and then it's quite okay to have a completely different tools for those things that are not happening in production locally. Like, for example, you might want to have some tool locally that will deploy every time you change source code automatically, right? You don't do that in production. In production, we push to Git and go to pull request, we have pipelines and what's not, right? And for those tools, for those scenarios, yes, tools like that are good. Now, the problem is that Kubernetes is getting more and more complicated for a good reason, because we have more and more requirements, what we want to happen. And I feel that especially for developers not skilled with the infrastructure and Kubernetes and what's not, create remote development environments. Say, hey, I'm going to create a virtual Kubernetes cluster. It's going to be set up the same as production. It's going to use very few resources and what's not, and then you can connect locally to that environment and do your things as if it's production, right? Octeto would be a good tool for that, right? So I would choose Octeto or maybe GitHub Codespaces to create those remote environments that are very, very similar to production.
Okay, thank you for responding to that. There is another question here from Kauka Kelvin. He's asking, he's saying that he's a big fan of yours and is asking for GitOps. You normally you prefer Argo CD to Flux CD. So you would like to understand if there is any reason why you prefer Argo CD.
So let me start by saying that Argo CD and Flux are both amazing tools, and you cannot go wrong choosing one or the other, right? So it's not, there are some tools that I can say, don't do this, like ECS that we mentioned earlier. Just don't do that, right? Use EKS. Don't do it, period, right? The huge difference. Now, Argo CD and Flux, very, very similar. Conceptually, they do the same thing. There are some differences that, depending on what you're doing, might or might not matter. First of all, Argo CD has amazing UI. And you mentioned in a comment, I'm a person who doesn't like UIs, but that's not actually true. I do not like UIs to perform operations, right? When I want to execute something, I execute the command, right? When I want to apply something, I apply it. But I do use UI to observe the state of something, right? So Argo CD UI is amazing observability type of UI, right? I can see very easily what's happening with my applications or resources or whatever. So I like very much Argo CD UI, but I would never create an application using UI, right? But to observe, just the read-only mode, UIs are good, and I use it heavily, and that's one of the big differences between Argo CD and Flux. Another big difference, and this is really on a preference, is that Flux uses tools like Helm natively, while Argo CD converts Helm charts into YAML and then applies that YAML, while Flux directly applies, executes Helm install equivalent, right? Which is the benefit for Argo CD, because then it knows every single resource what it is, instead of treating a chart as a whole, and then it can better track what's going on in your cluster. But the downside of that is that you don't have certain features of Helm charts that you have with Flux, right? There are a few other. I think that architecturally, Flux is better set up with different resources depending on what you're doing. While in Argo CD, everything is application. So that's a plus for Flux. The one plus for Argo CD is community, and that's probably the biggest one. Many more companies are involved with Argo CD, and more individual contributions, and the project moves faster because it has much healthier and bigger community behind it, and that's probably critical there.
Okay. So thank you for responding to that. So there is another question here from Roy. He's saying, I'm more of a backend developer, but currently I'm an intern as a software developer for TypeScript. I'm using TypeScript, React, and Tailwind. So when I look at the job market, they talk about Docker and Kubernetes knowledge. What will you advise someone like me to remain valuable?
I think that there is value in almost anything, right? Unless we're talking about being mainframe developer or something like that, right? So if you're a software developer working with TypeScript or React or something like that, that's okay. And you don't need to know much. I mean, Docker, everybody knows about Docker, right? So you should definitely learn Docker, because it takes 2 hours to learn it all together, right? So it's very easy. There is no excuse. Kubernetes, you don't necessarily, if you choose to learn Kubernetes beyond maybe very superficial experience, you would need to say, okay, from now on, I'm not going to be TypeScript developer. I would be Kubernetes expert, right? Because it takes dedication. You cannot know everything about everything. That's what I said before. And Kubernetes takes years to master, right? Because it's much more than it looks like. So my advice is focus on something, whatever makes you happier, right? And being a TypeScript developer is just as good as being a Kubernetes ninja, right?
Okay, thank you for that response. So there is another question here from Alan Mageto. He's asking, at what point does one move from a simple Docker Compose file to Kubernetes? As I sometimes feel like Kubernetes is an overkill. Yeah.
So if you're a developer, like the previous question, right? If you're TypeScript something, and you're in a company where there is no person that is knowledgeable about Kubernetes, and you want to continue being that developer, then there is really the important part in this story is that there is nobody else focused on infrastructure or Kubernetes or what's not. Then Docker Compose makes a lot of sense, right? And I would probably assume that you're in a company alone or very few people there, right? On the other hand, Docker Compose is for anything but small situations, and especially on-prem only. It's a waste of time, right? Because Docker Compose does not have what is needed to run it in production, right? You cannot schedule things across more than one server. It is not fault tolerant. It does not have networking capabilities that we need, and ingresses and what's not, right? There are a lot of things missing. So Docker Compose, kind of like very small company, maybe 5 people or something like that, cool. Anything beyond that, it's a waste of time. Every minute you spend on Docker Compose is 1 minute that you didn't spend on something else, and you should not run production with Docker Compose. And a good example of that is Docker itself, the company, right? Docker might be using company, people working there, they might be using Compose locally or no, I don't know that part, but I can tell you they're running Kubernetes in production, right? Not Docker Compose. So Docker company uses Kubernetes in production. That probably gives you Some clue.
Okay, so that is interesting. So there is another question here from Lusengeri Anzagi. Do you have any idea what process the CNCF follows when accepting or rejecting projects? The CNCF landscape seems cluttered with so many tools, many of which do more or less the same thing.
Yes. So I'll answer the second part of being cluttered, right? Do more or less the same thing, and that could be very confusing for users, but that's almost like natural selection, right? We want to have different ideas, right? And we want those ideas to thrive. And after a while, usually those things come in waves, right? Oh, there is something new, right? Similar like what I said before. Hey, we have the idea that we should orchestrate containers. Let's see many ideas. And then we got Mesos and Nomad and Kubernetes and Docker Swarm and Tupperware and 57 others nobody heard of, right? We want ideas. And there are many, and that's great. And eventually, things mature and they converge into one or two usually, right? So like, for example, if you're using networking, CNI, in Kubernetes, that is most likely going to be Cilium, right? After years of having many, many different networking solutions, most of us now, that's the idea phase, right? And we all fight with it. I mean, not fight really, but compete with each other with different ways to accomplish something. And then users slowly move towards one or two, right? And that would be Cilium for networking. Or we had many, many ideas how to do observability in the past. And then we figured out, okay, after those many, many different ideas, many, many different projects, let's come up with something that encompasses the best of those. And that would be OpenTelemetry, right? And we have many, many different examples that eventually those all narrow down to one or two. So I like many new projects because I don't think that who otherwise who will decide which one project is the best one, right? How do you do that? You need many.
Okay. So there is another question here as well. In case you've been responded to and you have follow-up questions, you can just type the questions and I'll still be able to read them so that they can be responded to. So Brian Oluoch asks, best least stressful way to manage, best or least stressful way to manage application and infrastructure code, same repository or different repositories. So it's asking for the best or less stressful way to manage application infrastructure as code. And then
Yes.
also, it's also asking, does the size of a team and type of application affect the branching strategy? Consider an application that does not have frequent releases.
Cool. 3 questions. Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So the first one, right? Same repository, different repositories. There is always, the answer can always be depends, because it depends. But I'm going to answer in majority of cases, or my preference, right? I cannot answer for 100% of cases ever. I prefer to have one repository for every application, and everything that that application needs, not only the code of application, but also tests, but also pipelines, but also Kubernetes manifests and what's not, everything being in that repository specific to that application, right? So if we have 10 applications, I would have 10 repositories. And then I would have environment repositories that describe that environment. I would have 11th repository in that example would be production. And there I would put Argo CD or Flux manifests that point to the other repositories of applications to say, go there to find this and overwrite those values for that. So the number of repositories I would have is the number of applications plus number of environments, right? That would be the first one. And does the size of a team and type of application affect branching strategies? Everything affects sometimes. I would not want you to think that whatever answer I give works always. Just give the answers that often works, right? And I like to keep branches simple. And the simple means there is one branch that is production, that's a main line. And you create temporary branches, very short-lived, where you develop some feature, you create a pull request. During that pull request, you might deploy to some ephemeral environment, you might test it, you might do whatever you need to do. When you're done, you merge it back to the mainline, period, right? So very short-lived temporary branches plus mainline. That's what I prefer. I like to keep it simple. That works. There are some exceptions when you need to maintain multiple releases of an application, then you might want to branch out from the mainline from a longer live, but I like to avoid that when possible, not always. So one branch plus ephemeral branches. And the third one was consider, that was not a question but a statement, consider an application does not have frequent releases. I don't want to consider that scenario. I think that releases should be as frequent. I mean, sometimes it's not many times a day, yes, but when you finish think of it this way. What is the smallest thing you can develop for that application? And when you finish with that smallest thing, merge it to the mainline, do whatever you need to do before, and deploy to production.
Okay. Thank you very much for emphasizing on and sharing.
I've worked in the past in companies and projects when we were releasing infrequently, like once a year or what's not. I'm never going back to that.
Okay.
Never.
Yeah. So there is another question here from Kauka Kelvin. So are you working on any Kubernetes native IDP project for developers to interact with?
Actually, I joined a few years ago. I chose to join Crossplane project, and that question is the main reason why I joined Crossplane. Crossplane is not the only piece that you need, but it's probably the most critical piece that you need to, and the one that I believe the most in to create an internal developer platform, right? You need things beyond Crossplane, many other things, but the critical piece is Crossplane. That's why I work there, right? So if the question is, are you working on any Kubernetes native IDP project? The answer is yes, that's Crossplane, right? Plus many other things. And that many other things, you still need, Crossplane is a control plane that manages everything. You need somehow ways for people to interact with that API. And that could be Port. I like Port more than Backstage myself, but it is not open source, so pros and cons. But some other people might want to interact with that API with CLI or Visual Studio extensions, right? It depends on the needs of people. You need GitOps probably. You need observability, so you need other things. But the critical component there is Crossplane. That's why I work with it.
Okay, thank you. So some of the members in our community are beginners in tech, and they want to learn about DevOps. So do you have any tips that you can give them on how they can navigate through that?
Forget about DevOps. It's a marketing thing, right? If you can get a job that is called DevOps, cool, do it, take it, right? Take the money, fine. But forget about it when you're learning. What you want to do is focus on something, right? Focus and learn. Okay, I want to be the person who knows inside out Kubernetes, or I want to be the person who knows inside out how to write TypeScript code, right? Or I want to be the person who knows this or that, whatever that is. Don't try. Later on, when you have much more experience, you might say, okay, I want to know 3 things instead of 1, right? But at the beginning, it is very dangerous, I feel, for beginners to say, oh, I want to know very little, almost nothing about many things, right?
Okay.
So I want to be I don't want to be expert in anything. Don't do that, right? Figure out what you're passionate about and focus on that. Don't focus on everything. And usually DevOps people kind of, oh, I'm going to know everything about everything. Maybe when you're 50, not now.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So now with AI technology, so do you think what are your thoughts about how tech is evolving and how that can impact developers, DevOps, professionals, people who know everything? How do you think that will be able to impact their career, or
Yeah,
which kind of tools do you think they should be using as well that are
I mean,
AI enabled?
AI enabled. Ah, okay. I'm not
Yeah.
that so I'm a user of AI. I haven't been building AIs myself, so I don't know whether it's former or later, right? As a user, yeah, I mean, GitHub Copilot is something I use all the time. That's probably my preferential tool because it's in Visual Studio Code, and I don't need to go to a browser or somewhere where I don't have a context. Everything is. I tend to use Visual Studio Code for everything, and then AI is side it, right? I did write some applications as well that interact with AIs, but I never built a model myself. So I'm not a data engineer. I cannot answer that part of the question.
Okay, okay, okay. So there is another one more question here that we are taking from the chat. It will be the last that we are taking from the chat from Sips Dolo, and he's asking, I've worked as an SRE intern for about 6 months. I'm currently on the market and would like to know what I can do to increase my chances of landing a role as an SRE or DevOps engineer. I'm certified in AWS Cloud Practitioner, GCP Professional Cloud Architect, and currently preparing on writing CKA exams. What kind of projects would you recommend I focus on to build my skills?
So let me start by saying that exams and certifications are very, very useful very, very early on. Later on, their usefulness is becoming smaller and smaller because, if you say, hey, I have 10 years of experience in this thing, nobody asks you anymore for certification, right? But early on, when you don't have real world experience, then it's very useful, right? So usefulness is opposite. There is opposite value between usefulness and experience, right? The more experienced you are, the less useful certifications are, and the other way around. One great way to so you what you ultimately want is to demonstrate that you have real world experience one way or another, and that you will not get through certifications alone, right? And that's a chicken and egg. Nobody wants to employ you without having real world experience, but you cannot get real world experience without being employed. And one very useful thing for that is open source, right? Join a community, contribute to it. You will get experience or some experience, and you will get recognition, and you will start building your name and what's not, right? If you look at many of the people I know that are very successful and well paid and stuff like that, they come from open source, right? Open source is something that you can do outside your work. You can do it on weekend nights. You can do it whenever you want, and it's very, very useful. It's so useful that quite a few companies, including mine, are having a much bigger preference towards somebody who has demonstrable skills and say, so here's a story, right? Many years ago, I spent some time in Silicon Valley in a small company. And one thing that I was doing when recruiting is that I would ask, hey, give me your GitHub username. I want to see what you did. And then some people would say, oh, but I never did anything in public. And I said, and my response was, I have no time for that because you all lie in your CVs, right? You all invent what you did, right? But contributing something in public is a public CV, right? It's something that you can see, that you can do and demonstrate your value. So my biggest recommendation is join a community, start contributing, start small, and then grow from there. That's the best way to advance your career, trust me. And what to join? What kind of projects would you recommend? Joining, I'm just changing your question instead of which project to recommend, but which project to join. That depends what you're passionate about and what you're using, right? So don't join a project because I say so, but pick a tool or a framework or something that you're using and because you're already familiar with it, and say, okay, I want to jump into that thing. Whatever you're using right now, that's a good project to join.
Okay. So thank you for responding to that. So do you think there are any basics that are important for someone to have? Now, even if they're going to pick an area which they're going to specialize in, as a newbie, somebody who's just new to, let's say even though you don't like the word DevOps, let's say they want to be a DevOps engineer, and they want some basics as they focus on a specific area. So which kind of, what do you think could be basics they should learn?
Basics are something that many people, especially those starting, are overlooking. And when I say, usually very often when people ask me basics, okay, basics of AWS, right? When I talk about basics, I talk about more basics, right? So
Okay.
if you're more into DevOps or what's not, what you really need to know is how Linux works, right? That's the base of everything. Kubernetes is a Linux machine, right? Everything is Linux. Understand Linux, that's the basic. You cannot get more basic than that. And if you don't understand how Linux works, and if you're not comfortable with Linux itself, forget about cloud, forget about all those things. Linux is the first thing you learn, right? Nobody will give you a job from that. Just to clarify, you will not get a job by saying, I understand Linux, right? But that thing, understanding Linux basics, will help you move much faster and understand. Once you understand Linux, containers, they're just namespaces in Linux. Containers exist in Linux. Docker is just a wrapper around something that already exists. So basics like that are very important. Understand networking, understand storage, right? Those are all the things that people don't want to focus on because it's boring. Kind of how you want to go directly to ECS. First thing I do, ECS. No. Basics are more important than anything else. And basics in case of DevOps, that's Linux.
Okay. Really appreciate that answer. So I think that will be our last question. And maybe if you have any other words that you would like to share with us, you can go ahead.
I don't know, I have many things, but it's easier for me if you just ask any question, I will answer it. Sometimes I will say I have no bloody idea, but I will try.
Yeah. So, okay. So what do you do apart? How do you ensure that as you are working as a person in tech, how do you ensure that you stay healthy?
Healthy, like physically healthy.
Healthy, physically, your diet.
Oh,
do you observe your diet?
I'm drinking Red Bull. I'm trying to survive. I'm not. I mean, healthy is not my thing. I'm locked in this room. There is no even window over there. I don't know whether it's day or night. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't understand how I'm alive. So,
Okay.
don't ask me that question. I do like in summer when it's not cold. I like biking. That's the only thing.
Okay. Interesting. And what about for your, let's say you're working on something and you feel like your mind is tired, how do you ensure that you stay productive?
Okay, that's one of the reasons why I prefer for a long time now working remote, right? I don't have fixed hours. I don't work like from 9 to 5 or whatever, right? I work only when I'm productive. So I might be working now after this meeting. I might sit to work for half an hour, maybe 5 hours, maybe 6 hours, maybe only 45 minutes, right? I work only as long as I feel I'm productive. When I feel I'm not, I stop. Maybe I go for a coffee. Maybe I go have lunch. Maybe I go and watch Netflix, right? And then when my brain recuperates and say, okay, Viktor, you're ready, I go back to work. So sometimes I work for long hours. Sometimes I work for very short period of time and say, okay, nothing comes out. Let me just forget about work. So I tend to distribute my work to work only and exclusively when I'm productive. And sometimes that's only 3 hours in a day. Sometimes it's 15 hours. Nobody knows. But I stop when I see that I'm not productive. That's the key. And do something else. Play a video game.
Okay. So, and then the last question. Now this will be the last one. So
Fine.
so for people who are maybe learning on their own, they're learning new tools, and there are people who go to schools. So do you think what are the best ways for someone who is not in an environment where they can easily access people, who they can ask questions, or they don't even know who to approach? Maybe when they are learning and they don't know someone else who is learning the tools they are learning. So how can you advise them about in their learning so that they don't waste too much time
It's just,
trying to solve problems, or things that can lead them into giving up on something because they can't find solutions?
I mean, the answer is similar, part of the answer to before, right? First of all, it's internet, kind of like every solution is only one search away. And it's all about communities, really. Go join a CNCF Slack channel or Kubernetes or whatever you're passionate about. And there are hundreds or thousands of people over there happy to help always, right? So having a community like at the beginning of this session that you were explaining, Samuel, kind of, we have a community here, local community, and then there are remote communities. Join communities, participate. That's how you get help. That's how you help others. And that's an amazing thing about open source in general and communities, right? We help each other.
Yeah. Okay. So that will be the last question. Thank you so much for taking your time to respond to our questions. And you have a YouTube channel as well. So maybe you can tell us about it so that people can go there and learn more about what you do.
Yeah, so YouTube channel is called DevOps Toolkit. Let me find it here. So YouTube channel, I like sharing. So whatever is on my mind that week, that becomes a video eventually. No structure, no ulterior motives. I just do random things and share them over there. So you can go there. I have also a podcast, DevOps Paradox. If I find it, let me see. With my ex-colleague Darin, I do a podcast over there, and then I don't know. I'm involved in so many things that honestly I don't know anymore where I'm at. Where I'm not. I'm a lot in CNCF as well. There's some webinars over there, Slack. So
Okay. Thank you for sharing the links. I believe I will also share in the group so that people can be able to access them. So do you have social media links where people can be able to find you?
yeah, I just
Victor.
typed my username, which is Farcic, in the chat, and you can find me in Slacks of the world. You can find me in Twitter. You can find me in everywhere is that user. So if you wherever you hanging around, that user is me always the same one. Nobody stole it from me yet.
Okay. So thank you. We really appreciate. And this will be the end of our session for today. And thank you everyone for joining. And I hope you've found some value through the answers that Victor has been able to share with us. And I wish you all a good week ahead of you. See you in the next event.
Brilliant. Thank you all for having me. And I would like to come. So I should come to Nairobi one of the days. I'll just need to find some event or something. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, so we have that DevOps Days event that is on 1st June. If it fits into your calendar, you can consider it 1st June this year.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was checking while I was talking. I need to be in US in beginning of June, so I cannot make it for that one. But if it, I need usually like upcoming 3-4 months. I'm very already scheduled, but I'll find something longer in the future and then plan in advance.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll be keeping updated on the events that we have. then you can easily find one that will you can be able to
Yeah, especially if it's in winter, because I hate winter, so I can escape where I am.
Okay. Okay, that is good. So we'll be sharing that information. Okay, so bye bye and have a good week too ahead of you.
Cheers, boys and girls.
Yes.